Hello and welcome to the third and final installment of my Power BI for Beginners video series. So far, we've imported our data, cleaned our data, set up relationships, we started building measures to aggregate our data and figure out how we wanted to display it. And in this video, we are going to put the sort of final touches on our report by looking at how we want to display it visually and how we might want to use color and different visuals and different tables to tell our data story. So let's get started. So let's kind of recap before we go into our sort of final stage here. We've brought in our data. We have created relationships between our data. We cleaned it up first in the Power Query stage. We've also created some measures to give us some calculations for our data. We've created a date table to help us keep track of date across all of our tables. And then we went to our report view and we started visualizing our data. And so far, those are the main steps. You're going to bring in your data, you're going to transform it using Power Query, you're going to set up your relationships, you're going to set up your date table, then you're going to start looking into the data, drilling into the data. You might vet it back and forth to make sure that what it's aggregating looks right. You might jump back and forth between this and your actual raw data tables to check things back and forth. Sometimes you may even have to go back to the raw data itself, like the Excel sheet or your SQL query or whatever that might be. And then the final thing that we're going to do today, and it's not as lengthy as the rest of it, but when you're talking about Power BI and you're going to present this to stakeholders, it is a very important part of a dashboard or a analytics report is how it looks visually, because we are visual creatures. We can't escape that. We do want things to look neat and orderly and like they make sense, and we want it to tell us as much as it can without flooding us with too much information. So that's the kind of balance we're going to try to strike with these Power BI reports. So what we're going to do is we're going to briefly look into how do you kind of prettyify your report? How do we make it look cleaner, better, easier to read, those types of things. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take our matrix here. I'm going to squish it down just a little bit. We've got our year right up here. I'm going to push this up just a little bit. Now, there are some templates you can grab out of the box. If we go over to View, this is where we're getting into kind of how it looks. And you also have some other selections over here. We're not going to get into these on this video. We will have other videos for that, like bookmarks and selection. Extremely powerful tools for guiding the end user of your report on how to view it and how you present the data. These allow you to tell the story how you want to tell the story, essentially. But we'll have another video on those. Right over here, you have some templates of themes right out of the box. If you click this, you have kind of even more. If you click one, it's going to change the colors. You won't notice anything right here unless it changes these sort of secondary table colors. But if we change this to like a pie graph, now you can see that it is changing those primary report colors when you change the colors up here. It's going to change more than that, but we don't have enough visuals on the screen to see what else it's changing. Now, this is where it kind of comes down to preference. You could be the kind of person that likes a white screen with just some basic visuals on it. You could be the person that likes more of the opposite contrast, where you have like this, like a dark background with white letters or a light colored letter to kind of stand off the page. You might be someone who likes to get kind of wild and make things really colorful. That's up to you and the company that you are presenting your data to. Now, there are some principles that we need to kind of stick to regardless of what your style preferences are. Now, I'm going to show you kind of how I incorporate those principles when I build a report. Now, I'm kind of a sucker for this one. I really like this one. I like that light colored background, and I love coming to my visuals like something like this. And then I'm going to close my filters pane here. So I'm going to drag the visuals out just a little bit. I like coming to my main visuals like this. I come over to format your visual. I like to have mine. You go to general, you go to effects, and then you go to background. I like mine to be white. So I like to have my visuals stand out from the background just a little bit. I like to have a light colored background with white visuals so that it feels cohesive, but you do have some separation here on your visuals. Let's start with visuals. Let's start with how to set up a great visual. The first thing I like to do, because it just makes it feel clean to me and it really starts this process off nicely, is I come back to Format Your Visual, I go to General, and I go to Properties, and I go to Padding. This is one of my favorite things in all of visuals. It's very simple, but it does a lot for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 20, then I'm going to hit Tab, then I'm going to type in 20, and I'm going to hit Tab again, and I'm going to do 20 for all 4 sides. You don't have to do 20, you can do 10, you can do 5. Like on a slicer, sometimes I'll do 5 or 10 because it's too small to do 20. It doesn't make sense. But this large visual, 20 is going to be great. So already, this feels better. Things feel more centered. They feel more balanced. It feels like I have more space. I'm more focused at what I'm looking at. It just makes more sense. Now, for this pie chart here, I'm going to get rid of some things. I'm just going to leave category name and total sales because we aren't going to measure those other things in a pie chart like this. And now that we've gotten this sort of selected to what we want, if we wanted to change our visual colors, there's a few ways to do that. You can first look up here in this little drop down. If you go to Customize Current Theme, you can change these theme colors and it will change these default colors on any visual you populate. Now, if you wanted to just change the colors, I'm going to click Cancel, change the colors on this visual alone, you could come to Slices and change your colors right here. And in any visual that has colors, has some sort of color element to it, if you've drug over a line chart or bar chart or something like that, when you come to Format Your Visual, there will be something under Visual that tells you, bars or line. It's going to give you the option to change the color of the color element in your visual. But if you want everything to be uniform, like a brand identity, specific colors to the brand or to the business that you are representing or presenting this to, then you might want to drop this down, go to Customize Current Theme, and put your brand identity colors in here. Now, you also want to consider, and this is far beyond the scope of this video, you do want to consider colors that contrast well, even outside of just color. You want to consider shade, hue. You want to consider people with color vision issues to where they can't see certain colors. There are actually palettes that take that into consideration to where they'll be able to distinguish these colors as well. These are things you want to consider. Again, very outside the scope of this video, but when you're presenting visuals, think about how can I make this as simple, clear, and concise as possible to the end user? And also consider people who may have trouble distinguishing color. So for instance, if we clicked our visual and we went Slices and we picked, all dark stuff for every slice. So sure, if you have typical vision, yes, I can distinguish these. But if I change them to black and white, I'd have a very hard time distinguishing them. And even with my vision, which I can distinguish them, it isn't pleasant, and I don't really enjoy looking at it, and it's not clear to read. It's distracting that it's so dark. So I use this as an exaggerated example, but it is important to keep that in mind for your visuals. So I'm just going to back these up to what they were. There we go. Much better, much easier to read. Now, the next thing I usually do to a visual, this is a little bit nitpicky, I'm going to be honest. It's not that big of a deal, but it's just something I like. It adds that extra touch. I like to go to my Format Your Visual, and then I go to General, I go to Effects, and I go to Visual Border. I create a visual border. I make it the same color as the visual itself. And I like to round the corners, probably about 5, maybe a little more. Let's go back to Effects. I'm going to round them. Let's do 10. That's pretty good. I like that. So obviously not super important, but if you start putting multiple visuals on the page, it just kind of looks nicer to me. So if I had, say, this, I'm going to squish it down a little bit. If I had this over here, now another cool thing. This is kind of a little hot tip. If I like my rounded corners and my padding and everything the way I have it, if I just create a new visual, I'm going to lose that. I'm going to have to create that formatting again. But if I just Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste this visual, it keeps my formatting, and then all I have to do is change the type of visual it is. So I'm going to go over here. I have it selected. I'm going to go over here and change it to matrix. And there we go. So now I have changed the type of visual that it is. So typically, I like to have 2 to maybe 4 visuals on a page. If it gets beyond that, then we need to create a new page and have a new category of things we're going to analyze. And it's also going to be important to consider, is this the dashboard of like a report, or is this like a drill-in page where you're going to examine a specific thing? If I'm building kind of a larger report for, let's say, an entire department or an entire type of work, so if you're building something for all of HR or your logistics or your sales analysis, just kind of an entire section of the business, I like to create a dashboard page where I can then have links to drill into the specifics they want to look at in that department. And since we're not going to take a lot of time in this video to dive super heavy into that, I pulled this up from a website, Numero here. They have some examples of Power BI dashboards, and I want to show you what I mean by this here. If we look, here's a finance dashboard. You've got revenue, profit, number of orders, number of customers, quantity. You've got revenue performance over time. You've got regional performance, looks like by type of whatever it is that they are selling. The performance ratio and the subcategory rankings. So they've got like a sort of barometer of the health of their finances in a dashboard. You can also change the years. Remember how we had slicers? These would essentially be like slicers that are filtering this data. So if you click 2015, you'd see all of this for 2015. If you said 2016, you'd see all of it for 2016. Now, obviously, they're going to have quite a few more tables that feed this and a lot more relationships, but you can get here pretty quickly once you understand how to kind of link them all together like we did with relationships and your measures and everything like that. Now, HR, number of employees, average salary, average duration, average age, new employees, the number of new employees by year, number of new employees over here by region, and then latest employees. You can also, looks like you can filter it by male, female, and region. You can even go onto logistics. They have orders by state, so they have a heat map essentially of the United States. This is really cool. These are really fun to make too. And then category splits, shipping mode orders, all kinds of stuff. And you can see kind of my influences where I've drawn inspiration is from reports like this, where you have a light colored background and a white visual. To me, it just looks really good. I love the way that this looks. You can also do a dark background and a slightly lighter visual with like light colored letters and visuals. That works really well too. I'll see if I can find one here. All right, so I found another one from Numero. And this one is kind of exactly what I was talking about. You have a dark background, slightly lighter visuals, and then light colored letters and the colors of the visuals themselves. This also looks really good. I do like this, but I just prefer the lighter one over the darker ones, but they both very much get the job done. That's a matter of preference. And I used to actually prefer these. I kind of shift back and forth. So as long as you kind of get the background kind of close to the visuals and then separate them by, a few shades, then it looks really nice. And then contrast your text and the colored elements of your visuals to be brighter or darker. If it's a light colored dashboard, then you're going to be fine. Also, check out the space. There's a decent amount of space between each visual, and that just looks nice to the eyes. It gives you room to examine and appreciate each sort of story that these are telling. It doesn't feel too jumbled. It doesn't feel overly done. It feels appropriate. Also, look what they did. They gave padding like we did a moment ago. They pushed everything towards the middle so that it feels centered. It draws your eyes in. It doesn't feel rammed up against other visuals, and it just gives a nice, even spacing. So for this one, I quickly searched bad Power BI example, and this is they kind of went over the top here, but man, does it really capture what I'm talking about. It does the same sort of things that we saw on the other report. You get a lot of different metrics that you can look at for whatever the data is underneath, but this is near unreadable as far as trying to focus on one thing at a time. I can find myself like I automatically just kind of start skimming over everything. Nothing draws me in. It's super jumbled. There's no space either. Like everything's like crammed in right up next to each other, so it feels really tight. Depending on your personality, this might even be somewhat anxiety inducing because it's just so much. And it's so crammed together. Like your slicer for your year is up here, and it's like one of these type slicers. I really hate these because they're very specific, and you have to drag them very specifically to the day you're wanting. I only use these if I know the end user wants to be able to select like small time frames, and they want sort of absolute control over what those days are. Like I know they might want to select a certain 5 days in July or something like that, then I might use one of these. But other than that, I try to stray away from these. And then they have selection slicers up here that take up the whole visual of it, and it just looks kind of awful. And the color scheme as well is kind of too much. The gray is fine, but there's no contrasting color behind it. Nothing is separated and distinct. So you kind of get the gist. If we come back to our Power BI report, you can already see we're on the right track. If I push this kind of down here, I push this over here, and then I'm going to drag this out, give us a little bit of space here. I'm going to push this in so that it kind of lines up a little better. Now, I sometimes will leave these extra long if it's a matrix, and I know I'm going to drag other drill downs. So say we had our categories over here. I'm going to drag item name. Click this. I'm going to drag item name as a row. So now I can drill into that, because if I do, now it's going to push this down. I'm going to drag this back over. Oop, there, it gets good. So it's going to push that back down. So I'm going to leave this type of visual longer so that when they do drill down, it looks better. I'll give you one more little tidbit here on the matrix or table. You can click over here on Format Your Visual. You have more options here because a matrix and a table also have just more things you can modify than like a pie chart. And matrices and tables have layout and style presets. So we could, change this. We could say minimal, and it will change how it looks. We could say bold header. We could say alternating rows. All kinds of different things. Contrast alternating rows. I like to do the default and then kind of fiddle with it myself. So when I do it, column headers, I'm going to change the background to white. I like that. I'm also going to come to values, and I'm going to go background color, white, and then my alternating color, I'm going to leave that alone. Maybe make it a little lighter, something like that. I might even make it even lighter. Let's see what our background color. I'm going to go customize current theme. I'm going to go to page background, and the wallpaper are the same. If you fiddle with these, you'll find out that they are slightly different. Page background is going to be what's immediately behind your visuals. So let's see what this color is. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this hex right here. I'm going to cancel, because I'm not going to change it. I'm going to click back to my visual, go back to Format Visual, Values, Alternating Background, More Colors. I'm going to paste that. Well, I said I was. There we go. So I'm going to paste that. I don't really like that. You can see it's too light. It doesn't really give us the contrast we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to values. And then all you got to do to correct this is just add a little bit more gray. I think we're almost there. Go back over just a little bit. Yep. I like that. So I just added a little bit more gray to it, a little bit more, took away a little bit of the light out of it to kind of give it that distinction there. Also, another thing I like to do is on my slicers, I like to come over here to Format Your Visual. Well, and first of all, slicer settings, I like a drop down. Some people like tiles. If you go to tile like this, you can kind of format the tiles. That's kind of how they had it on that one report you saw. They would have probably had something up here like this. And it would have the years, but they would have had a title of year moved out, or they may have removed it. Like you can go like that and just remove it so that they can just see the years and they could select it. So it's going to change everything based on the year you select. That's viable. It does work, and you could squash these down and make them look a little nicer so that they present a little better. But I just really like a drop down because I can fit more slicers in should I need to. So there we go. I'm going to add back our slicer header. Even though that's not the slicer header I use, I go to general and put a title on it, because a title, like let's say year tab, it looks more like a title. And then I come back and turn off slicer header. So that looks a little bit more distinct. I'm going to come back to my title. Might drop that down just a little bit, and then I'm going to center it. And there we go. And I might make that even a little bit smaller. That seems a little bit. And you can see, you kind of just fiddle with it until it feels right. Another thing I like to do on slicers is go to values under format visual, and I go to background, and I like to make the background white so that it stands apart. So when you select it, it's easy to tell where your selection field is. And I know this has probably got a background on it. If we go to general, we go to effects. Yeah, the background color matches the background color of the theme. I like to turn background off. That way the slicer, you can't see the actual frame of it. You only see the title and the selection box, and that's all you need to see. That's my favorite way of doing it. You can find your own sort of theme that you like, but that's my favorite. Now, let's say you had other categories. Maybe you had like a region or a store type or even more food categories, and you wanted to show them here and display them here, but you also wanted to add a slicer up here. That's where you could, like I like doing it like this. I Control C, copy and paste, because I already have the formatting I like. And then I'm going to change my title to category. And then what I'm going to do is under my, what's the field for my slicer, I'm going to get rid of year, and I'm going to get category name. So then when I drop it down, I've got my category names. I'm going to drag it until those all fit so that I can read them more easily. Drag this over just a little bit. So now I've got category name, and if I click cabbage, it's going to filter it. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense for our matrix at this point, so I might convert it back to a table and get rid of category name. So now we have this. So we have total sales by category name. You can see that. And then we have our item name. So we can see like the actual items. And if we filter category, now we have this. So you can slice up the data a lot of different ways. And really, once you've gotten the hang of creating your data model, creating your relationships, getting all your data cleaned up, and understanding how measures are going to aggregate your data and using them to achieve what you want there, once you get into building it visually, you're just deciding how you're going to tell that story about that data. Do you want them to be able to select categories? Would you rather it be in a matrix where they can drill down? And then there's even different ways you can have the visuals interact with one another. Like if we didn't select one of these, if I just clicked on that, see now how it filters this visual over here based on this item? So like broccoli here. There's broccoli. Broccoli is about that much of the cabbage category right there. And you can change that too. So if I wanted to go, I'm going to click it again to bring it back. Say I wanted this to filter differently. I would click this visual. I would go format. Now I would go edit interactions. That's going to pop up where I can edit interactions. And then I'm going to click this one. I'm going to click filter. I'm actually going to click this one. I forgot. You have filter and then you have highlight. If we click highlight, you get what we already had. If you click filter, it actually just changes, it shifts the visual entirely to that filter that you have right here. So now I clicked on NetLotus root and it gives me that entire category. So if you had like other slicers or other sort of dimensions applied to these visuals, you can make this filtering even more useful. So I'm going to put back to highlight because that's, if we have it on filter, it doesn't really tell us much. Like, sure, like it's part of that category. But if we go to highlight, we can actually kind of see a little bit more. There's other situations where filter is better, and you'll just have to kind of figure that out as you're telling your story. I'm going to click that again. There we go. Now you'll notice that I left some space over here. Some people like to fill everything and put sort of some menus at the top for their slicers or their selections or links to other pages that they make. So if we make another page and start building data on this one, we might have a link to that page from this page. Different people have different styles. I tend to like to put everything over here, and then I have all my links on the side, and then I put like, you know, a company logo up here or something, and the primary dashboard name right in here, and then I have all my links to my other pages right down the side that link out to other pages. But again, you can sort of decide how you want to do it. This is our bad example. In this one right here, you can see they've kind of done a similar thing, but they've kind of made it look more like kind of a tablet where you have little tabs on the side, which is kind of cool. Immediately, I don't like that these are squared. That's just me. I just don't like that. But they can filter by month. You can go year. You can go total. Looks like top pages. You have some other visuals. These, to me, are not formatted super great. This is a little squished and a little tight. But you can see we do have different menus that they have created. They've done a good job of kind of building out the menu function of this. If we click top countries, there we go. We've got that as well. But I think I would work on kind of cleaning up how the visuals present on the page a little bit. But this is a pretty cool idea for doing the pages and the menu selection. And you do that by adding buttons, and you go to insert, and this is where you can add buttons that take you different places. This would be where you could get into bookmarks. So you set the report how you want it, you set the bookmark, and anytime they click that button and it takes them to that bookmark, it's going to set the report to how you want it to display. And this is kind of as far as I wanted to go in this video series. I know that there's probably lots of areas throughout this that you might have been like, well, I'd really like to dive into that further. I'd really like to know more about that. And this is definitely not going to make you an expert, this video series. But I wanted you to see the clear stages of getting to a fully fledged Power BI report or dashboard. And that starts with getting your data in, cleaning it up through Power Query, building your relationships, building your date and time intelligence through the calendar table, and then you start diving into your data, building measures, building calculated columns should you need them, and then putting them into visuals to tell the story how you want to tell it or how the end users want to read it. A lot of times you come out with a report and they're like, well, I'd really like to see this, or I'd really like to dive into it this way. And you can go back to your visuals and slice them up different ways, potentially make different measures or new measures to calculate different things. That's another really cool thing about Power BI is it's very iterative. You can sort of present an idea and people can go, oh, that's awesome, but I'd like to be able to select this, or I'd like to be able to drill into this more easily. You can create a page for it. You can change the visuals for it. You can change your slicers or the presets or bookmarks or all kinds of things. So this kind of wraps up this video series. If there are areas you wanted to dive into more specifically, let me know in the comments and we can do that for sure. But hopefully this is helpful in at least getting you started on understanding the steps in going from just some data to how you get to the end result of a Power BI report.